Welcome back to Sibos TV. Right now, we're going to talk all about a common financial language for the financial industry. I'm joined by Alistair Milne. He is a professor of financial economics at Loughborough University School of Business and Economics in the UK. His research into a common language for the securities industry was actually presented on day one of Sibos this week, and we're lucky enough to have him join us here in Sibos TV to present a summary of his findings. So, Alistair, you and I were chatting in the commercial break, and you were saying, a lot of people here at Sibos, they're thinking, what's this common language? Why? What's this all about? It's not really the sexy stuff here at Sibos. Tell me why it should be the sexy stuff.
I think the phrase I was thinking of might summarize it. It's an old wine in a new bottle. So actually it's about many of the issues that have been core to Sibos for many years, about standards, about communications. But it's gone up the agenda because of the crisis. Suddenly, regulators around the world, the ECB, the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve, Bank of Japan, are suddenly saying, we've got to have common language so that, from their point of view, it's so that we can understand what's going on out there. Because it was lack of transparency, perhaps more than anything else, was behind the crisis. So that's the drive for common financial language.
So you've conducted this study. Tell us about this study and what is new from other studies that were done in the past.
Well, really we were trying to step back and say, okay, that sounds ideal. If we can all be using terms in the same way, then we can summarize, we can get all the information we need. But we looked at what really are the prospects for this. And actually, the interesting thing is I was working with my co-author, who's a specialist in what's known as master data management. So he's got a really deep understanding of all the databases inside the banks, all their market positions, all their customer data. And I think the big thing that came out of that is that it's a little bit ambitious to think we're going to get one common language. A bit like the old story of Esperanto, if anyone remembers that. The idea you'd create one language that everyone around the world would speak. I think more what we're working towards is several common languages. So to at least make sure in any particular area, whether it might be the payment space, it might be corporate actions that we've just been talking about, it could be to do with risk management, the same terms and language are being used, and then banks can work together much better. So there's big efficiency gains. It's not just a regulator gain.
So would a good analogy to what you're saying be that we all basically speak more or less the same language, but with different words, sometimes like different accents
and
for different
meanings,
things?
yeah. And what's I think a good way to think about this, there are so-called communities of interest is a good phrase to use. There are people with similar related jobs working with the same kind of issues. The first challenge is to get those communities to speak the same language to each other. And even that step, which takes work, is going to be very useful to regulators and to the industry.
So tell me, what were some of the specific findings, other findings that came out of this study that you've done?
A couple of things. I mean, it's a long report. It came to about 53 pages.
Okay.
And we might surprise readers. We went into a long detour about philosophy, and there's references to Plato and Aristotle onwards.
My goodness.
But that was actually interesting, because what it shows is that many of these challenges are reflected in many other domains. And again, it comes back to this idea, I think, of community of interest. So that was one sort of thing. It's not just that you have to define the terms, you have to think about their interpretation. The second thing, and more practical, was specifically to we looked at many examples of the way data is stored. We're giving examples of problems and how they're overcome. So my co-author Malcolm has worked a lot with mortgage data, mortgage-backed securities, mortgage performance, and very simple concepts like loan performance, the arrears, suddenly turn out to have very, very different meanings, even within different institutions. And so developing alignment, what's sometimes called in the business world ontologies, which is agreement on clear definitions. That's sort of the way forward. And it's case by case. It's looking, for example, at mortgage exposures. It would be looking at, as I mentioned, corporate actions, cash management, whatever supply trade finance, whatever the area is, there's room to work on common language, and there are standard processes that can help us achieve that.
And what is the sort of time frame for all of this? I mean, you've done a study, now what happens?
Well, in terms of my,
Yeah.
look, academics are tarts, you know, we'll move on to whatever the next interesting job is. So, you know, I mean, this is going to be a continuing interest for me, and I see myself doing work on this and other things for the next decade or so.
But what do you think
But for
someone
the
like
industry,
Swift could do?
But I think for the Swift, this is, you know, as I said from the beginning, this is what you've been doing all along. But it's moving up the regulatory agenda. It's something which, you know, it's reaching board level, much more than perhaps it used to do in the past. So it's not going to be overnight, but I think if we're talking about a decade, I think we'll see really quite fundamental changes in the way our industry communicates with itself.
And finally, where can people get a copy of this study?
So it's online. So if you Google Common Language Swift Institute or Common Language and my name Milne, then that will pop up and you'll find it straight away.
Great, thanks very much. 53 pages of a common language. Lots of fun-filled stuff waiting for you there on the internet, everybody.